Representative Patman, you can come forward, and Senator from Missouri, you can also come forward, and you can wait here on the side. Appreciate the comments from the senator from Alabama. We have a variety of models for future delegations and participation here, and perhaps the Alabama model on the delegations as a form of a conference committee that most of us have might be the best way to go forward. Representative Patman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kind of a cross discussion I need to understand on this resolution. Who's going to be voting? Because we have talked about on a continuous basis, one state, one vote. Now we have 3 people coming from each state who will be allowed to vote. That's 150 or 50, depending on the interpretation of the rule. And then when you get down to that, we start to get into the politics of the whole thing. How many states are red, how many states are blue, and that starts us off versus rather than pulling together. But at least be able to answer who's going to vote of the 150 people that are going to go forward based on what we're doing here today in this resolution, and what does that delegation look like based on the rules.
Thank you, Representative. An excellent point, and there are some different models that we have. What we asked in the letters that went out was for the leaders of each house to appoint one person and then collectively pick a third person, and for the delegation for this event to be bipartisan. And obviously there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But as we go forward and we really get into the work of adopting these rules that are going to be sent out, we'll probably have and we'll need additional appointments in order for those really to be legitimate and be acceptable around the country. So we have the model we currently have, which probably needs to be expanded. The model of the conference committee, which most of us are familiar with, where each of the 2 bodies appoint 2 folks and each of the minority leaders appoint 1, will leave us with a delegation of 6. Now, we probably don't have any place we can meet, any house, except for New Hampshire, where we can have 300 people sitting. But yeah, we can go up to 400 if we'd like. I understand that, Representative. Appreciate that. But if we were lucky enough to get to the point where we had 6 folks from 50 states showing up for this, and that should be our goal, we'll be able to accommodate perhaps 100 people on the floor and 2 people from each state at any one time, and the states can make their decisions about who will come onto the floor at that particular time. And to be clear for anyone watching or anyone here, we're not talking about the convention of the states, which we hope will happen in the future. We're talking about this body collectively coming together and making decisions. So, Senator from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ed Emery, Missouri Senate. I think just a reflection of the questions that are on the floor now, which don't really affect the resolution, but they suggest that there are a lot of unknowns that will probably arise once these invitations go out. And I know in our state, there was considerable confusion on the Senate staff as to exactly how to respond and what was being asked for. And I would just suggest that we make some, in the invitation, there be some very clear instructions in terms of contacts so that as these questions arise in each of our individual bodies, we have individuals and phone numbers, email addresses that we can respond to and be confident that we will get a response back with the answers to those questions, because I think there will be other questions that come up as we go forward.
Thank you, Senator. Representative from Georgia, Representative Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a suggested language change on Section 4. This would be dealing with lines beginning on line 3. This deals with the members that we're selecting from each state. And I wanted to specify that the members be elected officials from the respective legislative bodies. So I would request a friendly amendment to this section be that before the words members, that the word elected be inserted on line 3 of Section 4. And then after the word members, the following be inserted: of their respective legislative body. that would clarify that the members that are being presented to this body are members of the legislative bodies of each respective state. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you to hold on that amendment till we have an opportunity to vote on the other one, then we'll bring that back up for consideration.
My comments, I want to address the makeup of the future legislative delegations that could come to a meeting. I remember us having a very similar discussion, I think the identical discussion in Mount Vernon. And at that point, I made a comment that I want to repeat today. I think that, well, first, I know Tennessee, and we're probably not unique, we don't do conference committees on that model that was mentioned from the gentleman from Alabama. That's all appointed by the Speaker. And then any requirement to say you had to have two from one party and one from another, in some states you may have an overrepresentation of Democrats, in other states Republicans. I would urge that this body leave that up to each state to decide how they choose their delegates and what partisan makeup that choice be, because again, in some states, 80% may be Republican or 80% may be Democrat, and to require 1/3 to be one party or the other, you would have that 1/3 overrepresented in this body or from that state. So that is my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Ullery from New Hampshire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've been talking about who can vote on this or that. This assembly is only making recommendations to the states. The people that are involved in the process are not, this is not a delegation of individuals who are doing the actual convention. It's a delegation of people who are making recommendations on how a convention will be done. So it doesn't make any difference. Hold to the one person or one state, one vote rule, and how many people come, the more the better. Of course, I come from New Hampshire. We have 400. The more the better. That may complicate things, but being a veteran now, 10 years of the debates in the New Hampshire House, you get a good result very frequently when you have more voices being heard. So I would urge that the invitation have several elements. The first element would be that this is not a convention of states. This is an assembly of states to talk about a convention to propose amendments. That needs to be very clear. For example, something simple as capitalizing convention to propose amendments rather than leaving them in the lowercase. Sometimes that kind of topography helps. And we need to be very clear when, at least in conversations with the opposition party in New Hampshire, you have to be real clear that this is not a partisan thing. This is a thing to represent the states and the states' rights without the luggage that carries too often. The real right and the power of the state under the Constitution. I would hope that whatever invitation goes out makes that very clear. I know that the President of our Senate and the Speaker of our House, for different reasons, but agreed on that one overlap. They weren't sure what this was. So we need to be very clear on that, and I would hope the Executive Committee would take that into consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm John Overington from West Virginia. Has the question been considered if one of the two states' bodies refuse to participate and the other does participate, whether that state would have, what the status would be in terms of participation for that state? So if the House would say, we want to participate and we appoint, somebody to represent the state, and the Senate say, no, we do not want to participate.
It's an excellent question, because not only can we have a situation where one or the other houses may appoint and one may not. We may have a situation where we have, if we went to the conference committee model, where the minority party may appoint and the majority party may not, and several combinations that we can all imagine of those things. And so the question is, does that state get to vote? And I think it's something where the executive committee needs to come up with a plan and bring that forth and say, this is who is going to be allowed to vote, obviously pending approval of the entire body. And so we are creating this body, and that's why today we're not going to be trying to adopt important, not that the other things like the name in this resolution aren't important, but because we only have 22 appointed states and those are a variety of appointments, your question needs to be answered. I don't have an answer for it today. I think the executive committee needs to discuss that. Representative Kappinger, did you want to address that at all? Okay.
Point well taken.
Representative Vance.